Today we're going to look at the era of good feelings. This is after the War of 1812, and it's a time where we come together, very nationalistic, very patriotic, very proud to be an American. But that very same pride, that very same unifying force of nationalism is also going to divide us, and we kind of devolve into sectionalism. So let's get started and let's look at that. This is right after the War of 1812. We won. We beat the British, the world power, and we had done it once, not once, but twice, decisively. And we can make arguments about whether that was true or not, but Americans definitely felt good about who they were, how much they had accomplished, and the fact that you can beat a world power twice and not really give up any ground. Now, we didn't get everything we wanted. We don't have Canada, but that's okay. Again, we beat Britain. But probably one of the biggest beneficiaries of this was James Monroe, who is going to win in the election of 1816. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Federalist Party is fading. Remember, they were protesting the War of 1812 after we had won it. Not a good look. And as Americans kind of, come together with all of that nationalistic fervor, they don't look as good. The Federalists look petty. And so they're going to fade fairly quickly from the national scene. But Monroe's going to tour the country. He's going to have a lot of support. Everybody's happy. And really, the whole political party system is going to disappear until about 1824. And then we'll kind of begin to see everybody start fighting again. But this is, compared to today's politics even, this is a very calm couple of administrations. So we call it the era of good feelings. Everybody felt good to be an American. Not a lot of disagreement going on. And he's reelected fairly easily, almost unanimously in 1820. Now, I will say this, very little political disagreement for the simple reason that not everybody could vote. And I don't mean African Americans, women. I'm just saying that even with white males, who were the only ones who could vote, there's property qualifications in most cases, in most states. And so, we're talking about little disagreements on national politics among those who can participate. So not everybody can. While we have this political nationalism, Henry Clay is going to pop up. And I say pop up because we're going to talk about him several times throughout this chapter, but also in next chapter when we talk in chapter 4. He's going to propose the American system, and he's looking at economic nationalism, promoting national unity through the economy. And this is going to be presented as one bill, but it's going to be passed separately. Okay, so let's look at the three parts of the American system. One is a Bank of the United States. Now, we already have the Bank of the United States. Okay, and it's important. It's going to issue that single U.S. currency, which will hopefully give it some value, help us out economically there, hold our revenues, that kind of thing. And this is one that was proposed by Hamilton back during as part of his economic plan back during Washington's administration. And we did get that bank. And the original charter expired in 1811. And we need to revive. We need to renew this charter. And so it will be renewed in 1816. Call it the Second Bank of the United States. But you still have a lot of people who don't support the bank, primarily in the South and in the West. A lot of distrust over this bank, but really too looking at the constitutionality of it. A lot of Democratic Republicans are still opposed to the bank for that reason. The reason why you get enough support to pass the charter for the Second Bank of the United States is because it does make us stronger. Okay. The second part of his plan is increasing the protective tariffs. The tariffs themselves were also a part of Hamilton's plan. And the purpose is to encourage manufacturing, American manufacturing. Tariffs are a tax on imports, and it is to discourage Americans from buying imported goods, make it cost prohibitive. And the problem here is that your manufacturing center was in the north, and the south does not have any real manufacturing. And they claimed that the tariffs hurt their economy. I'm not going to say that they're wrong. In some ways, you could look at it as they are, because if we place tariffs on British goods, then the British might place tariffs on American goods. And they were particularly worried about Southern cotton. However, if we look at American manufacturing, a lot of it was textile based. And textiles use cotton, and they were buying Southern cotton. So this did not necessarily hurt the Southern economy, but they do tend to be anti-tariff. So just keep that in mind. Tariffs are our major form of revenue. We do not have income taxes. And so when we talk about increasing the tariffs, we're usually wanting to fund something. And in this case, we're talking about building roads and canals. These are called internal improvements. Today, we would call this infrastructure, regardless, specifically talking about building roads and canals with it. And we're doing this to connect different parts of different regions, different parts of the country. And again, the same thing, the same problem that we had talked about with the bank is going to pop up. What does the Constitution say about building roads and canals, or, public works? And the Constitution doesn't say anything. Thus, our strict interpretationalists are going to go, aha, then it is unconstitutional. Luckily, Congress went ahead and started approving some construction for some of these. Two of the more famous, or the biggest ones, one is the Cumberland Road, later known as the National Road, and it's going to connect Cumberland, Maryland to Vandalia, Illinois. And it's just a road, but it is going to make travel between these two regions a lot easier, a lot quicker, and to a degree safer. The other one was the Erie Canal. It is built almost entirely by hand. They dug this thing by hand, and it took a while, 1817 to 1825. But it's going to connect New York with the Great Lakes region, and if we just want to simplify it, it connects the Atlantic Ocean to the Midwest. This is so important, one, for migration. And you do see a lot of people from the Northeast moving into the Midwest, and they're going to take their values with them. But for trade, this is extremely important. It also is going to inspire a lot of canals to be built throughout the United States, because we don't have railroads yet. So very important in that aspect. Okay. But for all that, nationalism is a unifying thing. And let's go back here and look. Nationalism unifies. It's a unifying concept. But look here. The bank, disagreement. Protective tariffs, disagreement, specifically in the South. Internal improvements, disagreement. So where we see things that are good for the country, we also see disagreement. And a lot of that disagreement tends to be broken down on sectional lines. So as nationalism grows, so does sectionalism, okay? And that's that divisiveness, okay? The Northeast will focus on factories and trade, the South on plantations and cotton particularly, but you also have tobacco and rice, some various other cash crops. And the West is a place to go for people to exploit the new land. Now, the reality here is that because we focus on very specific things, and that's good. It's good. We can all work together, and we can make the United States a stronger place if we all can work together. And all of this is great, okay? But the problem is that as we look at these sectional differences, it leads to sectional or regional politics. The North is going to advocate high tariffs so that people would buy American-made goods. Let me just come back up here, and I'm going to kind of go back and forth. The Northeast, the North focuses on factories and trades. Factories and trade, they provide jobs. You need financial institutions to finance them for the capital. So you've got a finance industry in the north. They're going to make, these are the textile mills. They're going to make things. These are jobs. Jobs are going to attract immigrants. Immigrants need places to stay in the cities close to their jobs. So towns and cities are going to grow at a pretty big clip pretty quickly. We need to be able to assimilate our immigrants, and so public education is going to grow in the north. And like I said, that bank is important because of that, okay? So you can see, in addition to that, politically speaking, they're going to support that high tariff to make all of this possible. Because the South relies on plantations, they've got to do anything and everything they can to protect slavery. And that's going to be hugely divisive as we go along. Tariffs, because they don't like those, they import most of their goods, which makes things kind of expensive for them, but also fear of some retributional type of tariffs with other countries. Finally, the West. Exploiting new land. People want land, and exploit is not always bad. You want to farm, you want to mine, you want to build. So exploit can be negative, but it doesn't have to be. Think about why you would want to own land, okay? But they wanted it cheap. Okay, and they needed those internal improvements. They needed a way to get there, and they needed a way to move what they were going to be producing or mining or, whatever. But this, the characteristics, your politics are going to build up around it. All right, but let's go back here to slavery, doing whatever they can to protect slavery. Now, slavery is not good in the North, okay, because slavery would depress wages. So I just kind of keep that in mind. But as we move on, the next thing we're going to talk about is the Missouri Compromise. Okay, Missouri is going to apply for statehood in 1817, and at the time, we have a great balance of power in Congress, specifically the Senate, because, of course, the House of Representatives, our representation there is based on population. So in the Senate, we have 22 senators from free states, 22 from slave states, all equal. And then Missouri asked to come into the Union as a slave state, and that is going to create all kinds of problems. Specifically, it's going to upset that very precarious balance of power that we have between free and slave states. So to solve this problem, here comes Henry Clay again. He is nicknamed the Great Compromiser, and we will talk about him, like I said again, and the next compromise he gives us is not as great. Matter of fact, terrible. But the Missouri Compromise is what he gives us. Now, this only applies to land the Louisiana Purchase, and I'll show you a map in a second about why that is. Missouri Compromise. Missouri will enter as a slave state, and Maine, which did not exist even as a territory at this point, it was part of Massachusetts, is going to come in as a free state. All right, so we enter two states in, one free, one slave, and we can maintain our balance of power. We also come out with the idea that anyone else, again, in this territory, in this Louisiana territory, that wants to apply for statehood, slavery would be illegal above the 3630 line, and it would be allowed below the 3630 line. And as we'll see on this map, the line is there. That's 3630. You'll notice that Missouri is above it. But again, part of a compromise. There's Maine up in there. This is the Louisiana Territory out to the Rockies. And there's the Mississippi River. So it's just in this territory, okay? So all of this can be slave, and all of this orange can come in as free. All right. So good or bad? Well, it allowed us to have a state enter the Union. So I guess in that case it's good. We can move on. But bad, because we divide the nation into territories defined by slavery. And Jefferson, still alive, still kicking, almost gone, but not quite there yet. He says, but this momentous question, the Missouri Compromise, like a fire bell in the night, awakened and filled me with terror. I considered it the knell of the Union. Jefferson thought that this is, this is going to kill us. This is going to be the death of the United States, and in some ways it nearly was, because this is going to be a question that doesn't get answered until the Civil War. All right, let's look at some foreign affairs, particularly with the United States and Britain. Again, we fought 2 wars. How are we getting along? Well, we share a border, and after the War of 1812, maybe it's time that we fix a few things and make it better, make it a little easier to get along. They do agree that neither side, the United States nor Britain, would maintain a navy in the Great Lakes region along the U.S.-Canadian border, so that's good. They also set up a demilitarized border between the U.S. and Canada at the 49th parallel that goes as far as the Rocky Mountains, and this is the Treaty of 1818. The reason it only goes to as far as the Rocky Mountains because that's all that we control. Again, Louisiana Purchase goes out to there, okay? Not to the west. And again, there's that 49th parallel, okay? And what we're saying here is demilitarized. In other words, we're not going to keep an army, no armed forts on the 49th parallel, okay? I keep going all the way over, but right here, all right? Spain. Spain is interesting. We claimed that Florida belonged to us because it was part of Louisiana Purchase. It wasn't. Spain disagrees about that. They had given the Louisiana territory to France, but not Florida. But the United States is just looking. They want to move. They want to expand. And so American settlers began to move into the Florida territory. And the Seminole Indians, who also lived there, were really upset at that, and they began to raid American settlements, and they probably, which upset people more, they also helped a lot of slaves escape. And a lot of them would escape from South Carolina, Georgia, and run to the Florida territory. So there's a lot of anger there. And so Andrew Jackson is going to take care of that, and he's going to invade the Spanish territory. Listen, he didn't have permission. The federal government did not send General Andrew Jackson to Florida to take care of the matters. Andrew Jackson was irritated at what was going on, and so he went down there and did it himself. And he's going to capture 2 Spanish forts, so good for him, right? And now the U.S. has to clean up that mess. And that's going to fall to Secretary of State John Quincy Adams. Remember I talked about Secretary of State earlier? It's kind of the springboard for the presidency, so keep that in mind. He's going to give Spain 2 options. You can either take care of this territory and police it on your own, or you can sell it to us. Spain decides that that's probably the best idea. And so they sell Florida to the United States for $5 million. And this is the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819. You do need to know Adams-Onis, okay? It will be on the test. And this is it. You can see this is the area that's ceded to Spain, ceded by Spain to the United States, okay? And our new boundary line. All right, it's all part of the same treaty. And next we're going to get to the Monroe Doctrine, and we will be done for the day. What's the deal with the Monroe Doctrine? Well, it's a foreign policy, and I'm just going to leave it at that, and we'll look at the reasons for it and what really it meant to us, okay? Spain's been losing territories in the United States and throughout Latin America, okay? You've got revolutions against Spanish rule. You can see this is all New Spain right here, okay? I'm going to go back in a second, but this is all New Spain. Well, and they've been forced to give this to us, and the people of Mexico not really happy with Spanish rule, and so they're going to fight for their independence, and they're going to win their independence in 1821. Miguel Hidalgo y Castillo is probably the biggest force there, but you also had Simon Bolivar, who was leading revolutions to free people too. Now, the question for us, and the concern for us is that France, Russia, Prussia, and Austria kind of are looking to help Spain regain that land. And so, look, you've got some major, Prussia as a part of, and Austria both are become Germany in several decades, about 3 decades later. But you have some major European powers looking to help another European power gain control of land that's in our backyard, and it's a little concerning. So Monroe is going to get involved. He does not want all of those European countries, France particularly, but Russia too, to attempt to recolonize territories in the Americas. So he's going to issue that Monroe Doctrine in 1823. And this is going to be our foreign policy for years to come. And really, this is going to be the basis of our foreign policy as we get into the 20th century. This is what Roosevelt's going to kind of piggyback off of, okay? So let's look at the 3 parts of it and what it means, and we'll be done. 1. European interference in U.S. affairs would not be tolerated, and the U.S. would stay neutral in European colonies or conflicts. In other words, you stay out of our business, and we will stay out of yours. But that's a pretty strong language, would not be tolerated. You think about when parents say, we will not tolerate this, usually there's a consequence. We would also not tolerate new colonization of the Americas. Again, sounds very, very forceful. Just sounds good, right? And finally, any attempt by Europe to further colonize would be considered an act of aggression. So this is a forceful document. Sounds really good. The reality is, though, that we can't enforce it. We can't. And we're going to have to rely on Britain, the British Navy, to help us enforce this. And they're going to work with us. Remember, not too long ago, we were at war, 8 years ago. But the reason they're going to help us is because they have begun to trade with those newly independent nations, and they don't want to lose that. So they're going to have to help us out, and they've got economic reasons to do so. So there we are for the day. We have covered nationalism and sectionalism, and tomorrow, our next one, we'll be looking at Jackson. So do your warm-up for this one, and be ready for tomorrow.